Hello, this is Usha Rose, and today we're going to be doing a quick practice to warm up the hips, specifically the lateral hips, the gluteal muscles, the lateral rotators, like piriformis. So we're going to start in Baddha konasana with the soles of the feet together. And right away I'll just suggest that if this is a challenging pose for you, perhaps you'll sit up on a blanket. This will help a little bit to relax the hips. We'll take our first variation of this pose with the heels as close to the groin as comfortable. Press the soles of the feet together. You can wrap your hands around the outside of the feet. Sit up nice and tall. Take a deep breath in, close the eyes. Just allow yourself to arrive on your mat. Start to quiet the mind. Bring your awareness to the breath. Good. As your legs relax into this position, continue sitting up nice and tall, and you can lean forward. As you lean forward, really think about keeping your low back extended and lifting up through the belly and the sternum and reaching the belly button towards the toes. So staying in this extension as you start will get you a little bit further than if we just round down. We're not trying to bring our face to our feet, we're trying to extend up and reach the belly towards the toes. So that might mean just coming forward an inch or two. Maybe you want to walk your hands out. We might be able to bring the elbows to the floor or use our handy blocks and bring the elbows onto a block. If you can bring the elbows onto the floor, you might choose to take the block underneath your forehead and rest a little bit here. Two more breaths. And slowly come up and out of the pose. We'll take a second variation of this pose. Bring your feet a little bit further away from your groin. And the distance we're going for here is the length of your torso. So from your hips to the head. If you were to fold straight down, your face would land in the arches of your feet. So pressing the feet together again, sit up nice and tall. Reaching forward from the belly and lean forward. So again, you might have the hands on the floor here. Keeping a nice long low back, keep the sit bones grounded. Notice how this feels differently in your hips. This variation tends to be a bit more of a stretch for the outside of the hips, where the first version was definitely more for the inner thighs and the groin. Two more breaths here. And slowly sit up. Good, we'll bring the knees together. I like to take the hands underneath the knees for supported release. Let's come onto the hands and knees. Spread the fingers, plant the palms, tuck the toes, and move into downward facing dog. We'll take 4 or 5 breaths in downward facing dog, waking up the legs a little bit more. Pedal the heels, bend one knee as the opposite heel stretches towards the floor, stretching through the calf muscles and the backs of the legs. Relax the head and the neck, and find your strong, steady breath. You can release the neck by rolling the head side to side slowly. And add in a little bit of a swivel in your hips as you alternate side to side, shifting the weight side to side. And then very slowly bring the knees back to the floor. Take 2 or 3 rounds here of cat and cow. Inhaling, do arch, opening up the chest, lift the tailbone and the sit bones. Exhale, round the back, press the floor away. Inhale to cow. Exhale into your cat. Let's do one more of these, really deepening the breath as we lubricate the spine with our fluid motions. Great. So from here we'll come right into pigeon pose. We're going to stretch the right leg back and then bring the right knee forward towards the right wrist. Keep your left toes tucked at first to extend your left leg back, finding an inward rotation of the left thigh, the inner thigh is spiraling up towards the sky. We would like the sit bones to, or rather the hips to be squared forward. If you find yourself more in this position or kind of rolling over onto your right side, it can be beneficial to take a block underneath the right hip so you can really square your hips forward, or take the blanket. As you deepen into this asana, you'll want to start bringing your right shin parallel to the top of your mat and work on flexing the right foot. Lengthen up through the spine, and when you're ready, start to walk your belly forward. Again, bringing awareness into lengthening the low back and reaching the belly forward. This is a great place to utilize block underneath the forehead at any height. Or if it's uncomfortable to come down that far, you might take the block underneath the elbows. So as you settle in here, bring awareness into the hips and allow the hips to sink towards the floor, allowing gravity to really do the work for you here. Deepen your breath. And really imagine and feel the muscles around the hips, the top of the femur bone and the hip socket there. All those muscles and tissues just softening, spreading, and releasing. One final breath here. And then slowly begin to lift the torso, plant the palms underneath the shoulders, tuck your back toes, and you can either step back to tabletop and take a couple rounds of cat-cow, or step back to hands and knees and then lift the hips for downward facing dog. 2 or 3 breaths. You can either move through a few more rounds of cat-cow or just hold your downward facing dog for 2 or 3 breaths, maybe inviting some movement. And we'll lower the knees to the floor if they're not already. Preparing for second side, stretch your left leg back. And then bring the left knee forward towards the left wrist. Tuck your back toes under and extend your back leg nice and long, reaching through the back heel, inward spiral of the inner right thigh. And if you're wanting to deepen into this asana, you can work on bringing your left foot further forward, eventually bringing your shin more parallel to the top edge of your yoga mat. Untuck your back toes, ensuring that you have this inner spiral of the back thigh and that you're extended through the ankle. Deep breath to lengthen the spine. And then when you're ready, folding forward. And being sure to take your time acknowledging any differences between the right and the left side. So maybe you didn't need a bolster underneath your hips for the right side, but maybe you do for the left side. So really just paying attention to those subtleties and really personalizing your practice by using whatever additional props you might need to feel more comfortable and supported in your poses. Continue to deepen your breath as you settle into the pose. Two or three more breaths. See if you can bring more ease into the shoulders, into the hips, into the face. And when you're ready, you can release. Plant the palms. And either step back to downward facing dog or step back into tabletop, hands and knees. We'll take about 3 breaths just transitioning. You can move through cat and cow or be in your downward facing dog. From your downward facing dog, we'll walk the feet towards the hands and the hands towards the feet, coming into a forward fold with the feet hip distance apart. You can take opposite elbow or just let the arms dangle towards the floor or any other variation you'd like. Play gently with shifting your weight forward and back. Just observing how this changes the sensation you're experiencing in the legs. You can also rock a little bit side to side. I'm just going to turn to face the camera. And we'll move the torso a little bit, rolling one side onto the thigh, lifting the opposite side of the torso away. Finding a little rotation through the spine. And doing the same thing on the other side. Stretching into the low back and all those muscles that connect into the tops of the hips. Good. Release the hands towards the floor. Turn your toes slightly out, heels in, and slowly sink the hips on towards the floor, palms together, coming into a nice full squat here. So again, lengthening up through the low back, finding a nice long lower back, lumbar spine. Deepen your breath as much as you can, open and extend through the front body. Make sure there's no tension in the neck. It can be nice to stretch out the neck here while you're settling into your squat. Maybe finding a little rotation as we did in our forward fold. Just listen to your body, trust yourself to move in a way that feels good. Good, and from here we'll just come right back onto the bum. And we're going to move now into double pigeon, which is my favorite pose for getting really deep into the hip muscles. If your hips are tight, this is a great asana to sit on a blanket for. That'll really make a difference. And you might want to have a block handy or a pillow. So I'll be your mirror. We're going to start with the left shin in front of the right and the feet flexed as much as you can comfortably. So what we really want to bring awareness to is bringing both of our shins parallel to each other, parallel to the top of the mat. And you might notice just sitting in this cross-legged position that you're feeling a stretch in the hips already. And so your pose may be complete right here. You can sit up nice and tall and lean forward from here. To begin deepening further into this asana and the muscles in the hip, you'll start to stack your left shin on top of the right. So you'll notice here my knees are still a bit far apart. You might pause here and come forward. This might be enough of a stretch. The final phase of the pose, if you're wanting to come even deeper, is to bring your knees in a little bit so that the ankles and the knees stack one on top of each other. Sitting up nice and tall. And again, you can pause here and check in. Maybe you want to add that blanket under the hips now if you haven't yet. If you find that your knee is kind of floating up in the air like this, it doesn't quite go down, then support your body by taking a pillow or a block or something underneath the knee so it has something supporting it. Good. From there, feet are flexing, sitting up tall. Walk the hands forward. And you might just come an inch or two forward and pause there. You can relax the head. Deepen your breath and allow yourself to relax into the pose. We'll hold for quite a few breaths. Release any tension out of the neck and face, out of the shoulders. Pay particular attention to keeping the jaw relaxed here. And the option to add a little bit into this pose, taking it a little bit further, start to walk your hands and your torso diagonally towards your left foot. And you'll add here a nice little stretch into the low back and come even deeper into the hip. You might be able to hook the elbow to the bottom of the foot. Maybe the elbows reach the floor, or maybe you're taking that block under the elbows, or you might be up on the hands. So a few more breaths, whether you added this variation or not. Feel as though your sit bones are really connected to the earth, so resisting any lifting up, keeping grounded through the hips and buttocks. Good, we'll walk it to the center and slowly sit back up. Take the hands behind you to lean back, and we'll just switch sides. So remembering the starting variation, so now you have your right shin in front, and this might be enough, just sitting in this position. Cross-legged is very challenging for people who aren't used to sitting on the floor. So you might stay here, sit up tall, lean forward. You might add a stacking of the shins. Work on flexing the feet and maybe coming into the furthest expression of the pose. Maybe take a block under the knee. Maybe add a blanket underneath the hips if you don't have one there yet. Lengthen the spine, reach up through the crown of the head. Keep that extension in the low back as you lean forward, finding your limit, finding where you aren't really able to come any further forward. Maintain that flexion in the hips, and then you can relax into the pose. So maybe that just means looking down or adding the block underneath the elbows. Being mindful of the difference between the right and left side. So I find it can be useful in a home practice if you are tighter on one side than the other. So for me, my left hip tends to be tighter than my right. So I'll hold that side a bit longer And in a home practice, you have the freedom to really decide and hold the poses as long as you want, giving more time and emphasis on one side than the other if you know that side tends to be a little bit tighter and it could use that extra spaciousness. And we'll add the fold diagonally towards your right foot, spinning the belly towards the left thigh and the top foot. Maybe hooking the elbow to the foot. That was a little bit of a pushing into each other here. And you should really be feeling this in the hip joint. One more breath. And then release towards the center if you moved in that direction. And slowly sit up. Good. We'll stretch legs out. Give them a little shake. Come back into Baddha konasana where we started. And just notice if you're feeling a difference in the hips. Take the heels in close to the groin, lean forward. Hopefully you're feeling a bit more spacious here than you were the first time we did this pose. A little side to side, rocking through the spine. Sitting up, we'll take the second variation. With the heels a bit further away, sitting nice and tall, lengthen the spine. Lean forward, face towards the feet. Length out of the low back. And we'll add a third variation on this pose. So you will need a block or a folded up blanket or pillow. We're going to take the block underneath our feet, lifting our ankles. Press the feet together. Sit up nice and tall and lean forward. Allow the knees to soften towards the floor, continuing to push the feet into each other. Relax the shoulders down the back. Relax the face, the neck. And slowly release. Use the support of your hands to take the feet off the block. And from here, we'll take one more pose together, or you're welcome to move on to additional parts of your practice today. But just slowly rolling onto the back. Take your feet a little bit wider than hip distance apart, arms out to the side, and just rock the knees side to side like windshield wipers. Stretching a little bit through the front of the thighs, relaxing into the hips here. So from here, we'll bring the knees in towards the chest, but spread the knees apart. We'll move into a happy baby pose. Soles of the feet towards the sky. The hands can come to the outside of the ankles, wrap around the thighs, outside of the feet, even the heels. So just finding a position that works for you today. Let your low back and your hips sink into the floor. Deepen your breath. So we're opening up into the groin and the inner thighs. If you'd like to come even deeper into the inner thighs, you can stretch out through one thigh at a time, straightening one leg, and then taking the other side. After you've done this a few times, you might choose to straighten both legs at the same time, or just stay still in your happy baby pose. And when you feel complete there, we'll take the feet back onto the floor, wider than hip distance apart, and bring the knees together so they are resting on each other, forming a teepee-like shape and structure. And this is just a variation that will serve as our savasana or relaxation pose today. It's a great pose to relax the psoas muscle, which is the strong hip flexor, deep in the abdominal area, connecting the lower part of the spine to the femur bone. So you can bring your awareness here down into the low belly, into the groin area, maybe even take your hands onto that space just to bring some awareness there. Close the eyes and deepen the breath. You should feel that your legs are supported, so you're not holding any tension or efforting in the thighs. And as you breathe deeply into the belly, just feel the tissues relaxing, softening and spreading. Give your body permission to surrender and release. Relax the muscles in your face. And just allow yourself as much time as you have to rest here. Thank you for practicing with me today. Namaste.